The Tempest, Part 1. Yusif El Fakhri was 30 years of age when he withdrew himself from society and departed to live in an isolated hermitage in the vicinity of Kadisha Valley in North Lebanon. The people of the nearby villages heard various tales concerning Yusuf. Some related that his was a wealthy and noble family, and that he loved a woman who betrayed him and caused him to lead a solitary life, while others said that he was a poet who deserted the clamorous city and retired to that place in order to record his thoughts and compose his inspiration, and many were sure that he was a mystic who was contented with the spiritual world, although most people insisted that he was a madman. As for myself, I could not draw any conclusion regarding the man, for I knew that there must be a deep secret within his heart whose revelation I would not trust to just mere speculation. I had long hoped for the opportunity to meet this strange man. I had endeavored in devious ways to win his friendship in order to study his reality and learn his story by inquiring as to his purpose in life. But my efforts were in vain. When I met him for the first time, he was walking by the forest of the holy cedars of Lebanon, and I greeted him with the finest choice of words, but he returned my greeting by merely shaking his head and striding off. On another occasion I found him standing in the midst of a small vineyard by a monastery, and again I approached and greeted him, saying, "It is said by the villagers that this monastery was built by a Syriac group in the 14th century. Do you know anything of its history?" He replied coldly, "I do not know who built this monastery, nor do I care to know." And he turned his back to me and added, "Why do you not ask your grandparents, who are older than I, and who know more of the history of these valleys than I do?" Realizing at once my utter failure, I left him. Thus did 2 years pass, and the bizarre life of this strange man preyed on my mind and disturbed my dreams. One day in autumn, I was roaming the hills and knolls adjacent to the hermitage of Yusif El Fakhri. I was suddenly caught in a strong wind and torrent rain, and the tempest cast me here and there like a boat whose rudder has been broken and whose masts have been torn by a gale in a rough sea. I directed my steps with difficulty towards Yusuf's place, saying to myself, "This is an opportunity I have long sought, and the tempest will be my excuse for entering, while my wet clothes will serve as a good reason for lingering." I was in a miserable plight when I reached the hermitage, and as I knocked on the door, the man whom I had been longing to see opened it. He was holding in one hand a dying bird whose head had been injured and whose wings had been broken. I greeted him, saying, "I beg your forgiveness for this annoying intrusion. The raging tempest trapped me while I was far from home." He frowned, saying, "There are many caves in this wilderness in which you might have taken refuge." However, he did not close the door, and the beat of my heart quickened in anticipation, for the realization of my great wish was close at hand. He commenced to touch the bird's head gently and with the utmost care and interest, exhibiting a quality important to my heart. I was surprised over the 2 opponent characteristics I found in that man, mercy and cruelty at the same time. We became aware of the strained silence. He resented my presence, but yet I desired to remain. It seemed as if he felt my thought, for he looked up and said, "The tempest is clean and declines to eat soured meat. Why do you seek to escape from it?" And with a touch of humor I responded, "The tempest may not desire salted or soured things, but she is inclined to chill and tender all things, and undoubtedly she would enjoy consuming me if she grasped me again. His expression was severe when he retorted, "The Tempest would have bestowed upon you a great honor, of which you are not worthy, if she had swallowed you." I agreed. Yes, sir. I fled the Tempest so I might not be awarded an honor which I do not merit. He turned his face from me in an effort to choke his smile, and then motioned toward a wooden bench by the fireplace, and invited me to rest and dry my raiment. I could scarcely control my elation. I thanked him and sat down while he seated himself opposite, on a bench carved of rock. He commenced to dip his fingertips into an earthenware jar containing a kind of oil, applying it softly to the bird's head and wings. Without looking up, he said, "The strong winds have caused this bird to fall upon the rocks between life and death." I replied, rendering comparison, "And the strong winds have sent me adrift to your door, in time to prevent having my head injured and my wings broken." He looked at me seriously and said, "It is my wish that man would show the bird's instinct, and it is my wish that the tempest would break the people's wings. For man inclines toward fear and cowardice, and as he feels the awakening of the tempest, he crawls into the crevices and the caves of the earth and hides himself." My purpose was to exact the story of his self-imposed exile, and I provoked, "Yes, the birds possess an honor and courage that man does not possess. Man lives in the shadow of laws and customs which he made and fashioned for himself, but the birds live according to the same free, eternal law which causes the earth to pursue its mighty path about the sun." His eyes and face brightened as if he had found in me an understanding disciple, and he exclaimed, "Well done. If you place belief in your own words, well, you should leave civilization and its corrupt laws and traditions, and live like the birds in a place empty of all things, except the magnificent law of heaven and earth. Believing is a fine thing, but placing those beliefs into execution is a test of strength. Many are those who talk like the roar of the sea, but their lives are shallow and stagnant, like the rotting marshes. Many are those who lift their heads above the mountain tops, but their spirits remain dormant in the obscurity of the caverns." He rose trembling from his seat and placed the bird upon a folded cloth by the window. He placed a bundle of dry sticks upon the fire, saying, "Remove your sandals and warm your feet, for dampness is dangerous to man's health. Dry well your garments and be comfortable." Yusif's continued hospitality kept my hopes high. I approached near to the fire, and the steam sifted from my wet robe. While he stood at the door gazing at the grey skies, my mind searched and scurried for the opening wedge into his background. I asked innocently, "Has it been long since you came to this place?" Without looking at me, he answered quietly, "I came to this place when the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." I was aghast at these words. Struggling to gather my shocked and scattered wits, I said to myself, how fantastic this man is, and how difficult is the path that leads to his reality. But I shall attack cautiously and slowly and patiently, until his reticence turns into communication and his strangeness into understanding. Night was spreading her black garment upon those valleys, and the tempest was shrieking dizzily, and the rain becoming stronger. I began to fancy that the biblical flood was coming again, to abolish life and wash man's filth from God's earth. It seemed that the revolution of elements had created in Yusuf's heart a tranquility which often comes as a reaction to temperament and converts aloneness into conviviality. He ignited 2 candles and then placed before me a jar of wine and large tray containing bread, cheese, olives, honey, and some dry fruits. Then he sat near me, and after apologizing for the small quantity, but not for the simplicity of the food, asked me to join him. We partook of the repast in understanding silence, listening to the wailing of the wind and the crying of the rain, and at the same time I was contemplating his face and trying to dig out his secrets, meditating the possible motive underlying his unusual existence. Having finished, he took a copper kettle from the fire and poured pure, aromatic coffee into 2 cups. Then he opened a small box and offered me a cigarette, addressing me as brother. I took one while drinking my coffee, not believing what my eyes were seeing. He looked at me smilingly, and after he had inhaled deeply of his cigarette and sipped some coffee, he said, "Undoubtedly you are thinking upon the existence here of wine and tobacco and coffee. And you may also be wondering over my food and comforts. Your curiosity is justified in all respects, for you are one of the many who believe that in being away from the people, one is absent from life and must abstain from all its enjoyment." Quickly I agreed. Yes, it is related by the wise men that he who deserts the world for the purpose of worshipping God alone will leave behind all the enjoyment and plenty of life, contenting himself with the simple products of God alone and existing on plants and water. After a pause, heavy with thought, he mused, "I could have worshipped God while living among his creatures, for worship does not require solitude. I did not leave the people in order to see God, for I had always seen him at the home of my father and mother. I deserted the people because their natures were in conflict with mine, and their dreams did not agree with my dreams. No, I left man because I found that the wheel of my soul was turning one way and grinding harshly against the wheels of other souls, which were turning in the opposite direction. No, I left civilization because I found it to be an old and corrupt tree, strong and terrible, whose roots are locked into the obscurity of the earth, and whose branches are reaching beyond the cloud. But its blossoms are of greed and evil and crime, and its fruit is of woe and misery and fear. Crusaders have undertaken to blend good into it and change its nature, but they could not succeed. They died disappointed, persecuted, and torn." Yusuf leaned toward the side of the fireplace, as if awaiting the impression of his words upon my heart. I thought it best to remain a listener, and he continued, "No, I did not seek solitude to pray and lead a hermit's life. For prayer, which is the song of the heart, will reach the ears of God even when mingled with the shout and cry of thousands of voices. To live the life of a recluse is to torture the body and soul and deaden the inclinations, a kind of existence which is repugnant to me, for God has erected the bodies as temples for the spirits, and it is our mission to deserve and maintain the trust reposed in us by God. No, my brother, I did not seek solitude for religious purposes, but solely to avoid the people and their laws, their teachings and their traditions, their ideas and their clamour and their wailing. I sought solitude in order to keep from seeing the faces of men who sell themselves and buy with the same price that which is lower than they are, spiritually and materially. I sought solitude in order that I might not encounter the women who walk proudly with 1,000 smiles upon their lips, while in the depths of their thousands of hearts there is but one purpose. I sought solitude in order to conceal myself from those self-satisfied individuals who see the spectre of knowledge in their dreams and believe that they have attained their goal. I fled from society to avoid those who see but the phantom of truth in their awakening and shout to the world that they have acquired completely the essence of truth. I deserted the world and sought solitude because I became tired of rendering courtesy to those multitudes who believe that humility is a sort of weakness, and mercy a kind of cowardice, and snobbery a form of strength. No, my brother, I sought solitude because my soul wearied of association with those who believe sincerely that the sun and moon and stars do not rise save from their coffers, and do not set except in their gardens. I ran from the office seekers who shatter the earthly fate of the people, while throwing into their eyes the golden dust, and filling their ears with sounds of meaningless talk. No, I departed from the ministers who do not live according to their sermons, and who demand of the people that which they do not solicit of themselves. I sought solitude, my brother, because I never obtained kindness from a human unless I paid the full price with my heart. I sought solitude because I loathe that great and terrible institution which people call civilization, that symmetrical monstrosity erected upon the perpetual misery of humankind. I sought solitude, for in it there is a life full for the spirit and for the heart and for the body. I found the endless prairies where the light of the sun rests, and where the flowers breathe their fragrance into space, and where the streams sing their way to the sea. I discovered the mountains, where I found the fresh awakening of spring, and the colourful longing of summer, and the rich songs of autumn, and the beautiful mystery of winter. I came to this far corner of God's domain, for I hungered to learn the secrets of the universe and approach close to the throne of God. Yusif breathed deeply, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. His eyes shone with strange and magical rays, and upon his radiant face appeared the signs of pride, will, and contentment. A few minutes passed, and I was gazing placidly at him, and pondering the unveiling of what had been hidden from me. Then I addressed him saying, "You are undoubtedly correct in most of the things you have said. But through your diagnosis of the social ailment, you prove at the same time that you are a good doctor. And I believe that the sick society is in dire need of such a physician, who should cure it or kill it. This distressed world begs your attention. Is it just or merciful to withdraw yourself from the ailing patient and deny him your benefit?" He stared at me thoughtfully and then said with futility, "Since the beginning of the world, the doctors have been trying to save people from their disorders. Some use knives, while others use potions. But pestilence spread hopelessly. It is my wish that the patient would content himself with remaining in his filthy bed, meditating his long-continued sores. But instead, he stretches his hands from under the robe and clutches at the neck of each who comes to visit him, choking him to death. What irony it is! The evil patient kills the doctor, and then closes his eyes and says within himself, 'He was a great physician.' No, brother, no one on earth can benefit humanity. The sower, however wise and expert he may be, cannot cause the field to sprout in winter." And I argued, the people's winter will pass away, and then comes the beautiful spring, and the flowers must surely bloom in the fields, and the brooks will leap again in the valleys. He frowned and said bitterly, "Alas, has God divided man's life, which is the whole creation, into seasons like those of the year? Will any tribe of human beings living now in God's truth and spirit desire to reappear on the face of this earth? Will ever the time come when man settles and abides at the right arm of life, rejoicing with the brilliant light of day and the peaceful silence of night? Can that dream become reality? Can it materialize after the earth has been covered with human flesh and drenched with man's blood?" And Yusuf stood and raised his hand toward the sky as if pointing at a different world, and he continued, "This is naught but a vain dream for the world, but I am finding its accomplishment for myself. And what I am discovering here occupies every space in my heart and in the valleys and in the mountains." He now raised his intense voice. "What I really know to be true is the crying of my inner self. I am here living, and in the depths of my existence there is a thirst and hunger, and I find joy in partaking of the bread and wine of life from the vases which I make and fashion by my own hands. For this reason I abandoned the boards of the people and came to this place, and I shall remain here until the ending." He continued walking back and forth across the room in agitation while I was pondering his sayings and meditating the description of society's gaping wounds. I ventured again a tactful criticism. "I hold the utmost regard for your opinion and intentions, and I envy and respect your solitude and aloneness. But I know that this miserable nation has sustained a great loss in your expatriation, for she is in need of an understanding healer to help her through her difficulties and awaken her spirit." He shook his head slowly and said, "This nation is like all nations, and the people are made of the same element and do not vary in their appearance, which is of no consequence. The misery of our Oriental nations is the misery of the world, and what you call civilization in the West is naught but another spectre of the many phantoms of tragic deception. Hypocrisy will always remain, even if her fingertips are colored and polished. And deceit will never change if her touch becomes soft and delicate. And falsehood will never turn into truth, even if you dress her with silken robes and place her in the palace. And greed will not become contentment, nor will crime become virtue. And eternal slavery to teachings, to customs, and to history will remain slavery, even if she paints her face and disguises her voice. Slavery will remain slavery in all her horrible form, even if she now calls herself liberty. No, my brother, the West is not higher than the East, nor is the West lower than the East. And the difference that stands between the two is not greater than the difference between the tiger and the lion. There is a just and perfect law that I have found behind the exterior of society, which equalizes misery, prosperity, and ignorance. It does not prefer one nation or another, nor does it oppress one tribe in order to enrich another. I exclaimed, then civilization is vanity, and all in it is vanity. He quickly responded, yes, civilization is vanity, and all in it is vanity. Inventions and discoveries are but amusement and comfort for the body when it is tired and weary. The conquest of distance and the victory over the seas are but false fruit, which do not satisfy the soul nor nourish the heart, neither lift the spirit, for they are afar from nature. And those structures and theories which man calls knowledge and art are naught except shackles and golden chains which man drags, and he rejoices with their glittering reflections and ringing sounds. They are strong cages whose bars man commenced fabricating ages ago, unaware that he was building from inside and that he would soon become his own prisoner to eternity. Yes, vain are the deeds of man, and vain are his purposes, and all is vanity upon the earth. He paused, then slowly added, and among all vanities of life, there is only one thing that spirit loves and craves, one thing dazzling and alone. What is it? I inquired with quivering voice. He looked at me for a long minute, and then closed his eyes and placed his hands on his chest, while his face brightened. And with a serene and sincere voice he said, "It is an awakening in the spirit. It is an awakening in the inner depths of the heart. It is an overwhelming and magnificent power that descends suddenly upon man's conscience and opens his eyes, whereupon he sees life amid a dizzying shower of brilliant music, surrounded by a circle of great light, with man standing as a pillar of beauty between the earth and the firmament. It is a flame that suddenly rages within the spirit and sears and purifies the heart, ascending above the earth and hovering in the spacious sky. It is a kindness that envelops the individual's heart, whereby he would bewilder and disapprove all who opposed it, and revolt against those who refuse to understand its great meaning. It is a secret hand which removed the veil from my eyes while I was a member of society, amidst my family, my friends, and my countrymen. Many times I wondered and spoke to myself, saying, "What is this universe, and why am I different from those people who are looking at me? And how do I know them? And where did I meet them? And why am I living among them? Am I a stranger among them? Or is it they who are strange to this earth, built by life, who entrusted me with the keys?" He suddenly became silent, as if remembering something he had seen long before, refusing to reveal it. Then he stretched his arms forward and whispered, "That is what happened to me 4 years ago, when I left the world and came to this void place to live in the awakeness of life and enjoy kind thoughts and beautiful silence." He walked toward the door, looking at the depths of the darkness as if preparing to address the tempest. But he spoke in a vibrating voice, saying, "It is an awakening within the spirit. He who knows it is unable to reveal it by words. He who knows it not will never think upon the compelling and beautiful mystery of his existence." An hour had passed, and Yusif El Fakhri was striding about the room, stopping at random and gazing at the tremendous grey skies. I remained silent, reflecting upon the strange unison of joy and sorrow in his solitary life. Later in the night he approached me and stared long into my face, as if wanting to commit to memory the picture of the man to whom he had disclosed the piercing secrets of his life. My mind was heavy with turmoil, my eyes with mist. He said quietly, "I am going now to walk through the night with the tempest, to feel the closeness of nature's expression. It is a practice that I enjoy greatly in autumn and winter. Here is the wine, and there is tobacco. Please accept my home as your own for the night." He wrapped himself in a black robe and added smilingly, "I beg you to fasten the door against the intruding humans when you leave in the morning, for I plan to spend the day in the forest of the holy cedars." Then he walked toward the door, carrying a long walking staff, and concluded, "If the tempest surprises you again while you are in this vicinity, do not hesitate to take refuge in this hermitage. I hope you will teach yourself to love and not to fear the tempest. Good night, my brother." He opened the door and walked out with his head high into the dark. I stood at the door to see which course he had taken, but he had disappeared from view. For a few minutes I heard the fall of his feet upon the broken stones of the valley. Morning came, after a night of deep thought, and the tempest had passed away, while the sky was clear and the mountains and the plains were reveling in the sun's warm rays. On my way back to the city, I felt the spiritual awakening of which Yusif El Fakhri had spoken, and it was raging throughout every fibre of my being. I felt that my shivering must be visible, and when I calmed, all about me was beauty and perfection. As soon as I reached the noisome people and heard their voices and saw their deeds, I stopped and said within myself, "Yes, the spiritual awakening is the most essential thing in man's life, and it is the sole purpose of being. Is not civilization, in all its tragic forms, a supreme motive for spiritual awakening? Then how can we deny existing matter, while its very existence is unwavering proof of its conformability into the intended fitness? The present civilization may possess a vanishing purpose, but the eternal law has offered to that purpose a ladder whose steps can lead to a free substance.